Welcome, reanimated fans, to our podcast. It's been a tick, but summertime plans got in the way. We're happy to be back this weekend, though, and talking about the first installation of Wyrmwood, which is an Australian film that came out in 2014, is now on Amazon Originals. But introducing to you my intrepid co-host, as always, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
G'day, mate.
So talking about that, and we'll probably talk about the sequel, I hope, at some point, but which is Wyrmwood Apocalypse that came out in 2021. But before we talk about Wyrmwood, the first installation, we have a bunch of news items, some of which I'm super excited about. Museum of the Moving Image in New York, which is in Astoria, has a really cool zombie exhibition happening. It starts June 25th, and they're doing screenings of a bunch of Romero films. But the exhibit itself is called Living with the Walking Dead. And it is basically the origins of all things of Romero and zombies, fandom, all of that stuff. So it's pretty cool. I think they also have original like props and things like that. And I am definitely going to check it out. So I might go and then report back. I don't know if I'm guessing these things are going to probably be sold out, but they're doing a bunch of screenings as well of all Romero films. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, Living with the Walking Dead is going through January, like through New Year's Eve. So that one, I think you should be able to get into. I don't know what there will be in terms of screenings for that, but the actual screenings, they're playing some of these movies multiple times.
Oh, I'm totally there. I mean,
yeah,
I'm going to see Shaun of the Dead on the big screen. I can't pass that up.
What was curious was that Dawn of the Dead, the original Dawn of the Dead, is not listed. There was a note somewhere like, well, we're adding it later. It was kind of interesting.
They may have to get some permissions or something, but I also was interested to see that One Cut of the Dead was amongst the things that they're playing, which I'm really psyched for them that they're getting. So that is such a great film. I really enjoyed the heck out of that film.
Yeah, One Cut of the Dead, other than Shaun of the Dead, these are the only two kind of outliers. Everything else is Romero, and I guess they're just suggesting that they are real spiritual successors. I think Shaun of the Dead certainly, One Cut of the Dead less so, but it's such an interesting film that sure, throw it in there. And then the White Zombie Nightmares of Empire, I think, sounds like a really interesting kind of. It sounds like it's going to be like lectures, maybe mixed with these really old school zombie movies, a lot of which we have not seen, other than Zombie 2 by Lucio Fulci. I don't think we've seen any of the others. No, I Walked with a Zombie. I feel like that's been on my list forever, but some of these are like 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s movies. And then the lecture series is going to be about like how the rise of Western zombie media comes out of the fall of imperialism. And it would be a really fun lecture series if there are lectures there. I believe there is like a docent or somebody who's going to be accompanying the movies.
I'm just really curious. I mean, because this is a very extensive exhibition, multiple sort of things going on. So clearly it took a ton of time to put all of this together. So I'm really just all for it.
And it would take a ton of time to take it all in, right? Like these are multi-week exhibitions, not the Films of the Dead. That's only like 5 days. No, it's not. It's a month and a half. But like it'll take so long to just take it all in.
To give just sort of some kind of like contrast to other things that are there. They also have, a Jim Henson exhibition. It's all like all over the place. They have Creatures of the Land of, like the Dark Crystal, which is also Jim Henson.
Oh, that's so cool.
So they've got like a ton of kind of cool things that are definitely sort of in line with my interest personally.
Sounds like it might be worth a trip to Queens for sure.
Yeah. So without question, this is definitely going to get me over there. It's all right. I'm going to get some really tasty food from my favorite Greek restaurant over there. Which, it's worth the trip anyway, but it will be, I will report back. I'm really excited about this. This is awesome. So more to be continued on that. Maybe you should make a trip to New York, Stuart.
that does sound like something I should do.
I know. And you found a bunch of other stuff
Oh
coming
yeah,
up.
this is a good week for news, but we also have been out of the mix for a little while, so maybe
True.
I don't know if some of these are catching up. But one thing that I discovered was a trailer for a game called Zombie Cure Lab, and I played the demo actually, and it's a fun little game. It's a base builder where, and I love this premise. It's kind of like the movie Fido, where they domesticated zombies. You remember that one? And they had like
Yep.
little gizmos, I think, that would keep them in line. In this, you have like a team of scientists, and you build a little base, and then you can go through a research chain and build like ways to domesticate the zombies that come out every night and attack your base. And so you can freeze them and then put some sort of machine on them to domesticate them, and then you use them as your labor force. But then the threat is that, like, if then you have to keep them happy by like working out and eating raw meat. I think are the two of the mechanisms to keep the zombies happy. And if they lose their happiness, they will go feral again and start killing your scientists in your base. And I think this is just a really fun sort of seesaw to try and balance while you're doing a base building game and trying to get resources. So it's called Zombie Cure Lab. There's a demo that you can download and play right now on Steam, and I think the game's coming out this summer. So that's that.
Sorry, just to skip back, but just read that this whole Living with the Walking Dead exhibition is, obviously organized Museum of Moving Image, but it is presented with support of AMC Networks.
And
So
Shudder,
that should
yeah,
be much of a shock. Anyway.
yeah. Well, and Shudder is owned by AMC, right? And they're
Yep,
of
yep,
course
yep.
this is a great. Yeah. I wonder if it's just like multi-level marketing that they're pushing out here. It makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut in.
No, it's fine. I just got through describing Zombie Cure Lab, and then I also saw Netflix's Geeked Week was recently. Honestly, between video games and like project announcements, it's been kind of a busy little time here.
Mhm.
But the Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead, bit of an unwieldy title, but it's apparently a manga, and it's being adapted to a movie coming to Netflix. Not sure when. I think all that's out there really right now is a still photo of a kid riding a bicycle away from a horde of undead. The premise here also sounds quite comedic, and I think that's going to be one of the things. This guy hates his job so much that he's relieved once the zombie apocalypse breaks out, I think is kind of the central theme. And so he's like, well, I guess now that I don't have to go to my terrible job, I will just do the 100 things I most wanted to do before I become a zombie.
All right. Well, I mean, that's a fair goal, right?
It's just priorities.
Right. So, and then, and amongst other projects coming up, this is one that has been getting just a ton of play. Mad God on Shudder. There's a review in the New York Times, but I think you found a bunch of different things about it. And it's a stop motion, like kind of I just took a look at just a couple of shots. It does look very bleak, and I will say that I don't know how much I am going to enjoy this, because there's definitely some body horror elements, which is not my fave. But I would say that just looking at the amount of time it must have taken
30
to
years.
It's probably worth checking out regardless. And the director is Phil Tippett, who I think, and in fact, I think it's going to be, this is like, I think they're playing this at a theater near me as well. So I don't know if I'm going to try to see it, but I don't know if it's like a limited play or not, but it's playing at the Nighthawk. So that I almost feel like this might be worth seeing in the theater. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you'd have to be pretty stealing yourself to go and do that.
I know. I saw even the outtakes. I had to like stop it. I'm just not cut out for body horror.
Like the monsters that Phil Tippett has made, I think are like immediately recognizable. He did the AT-AT, he did the Tauntauns in Star Wars, he did the Rancor, he did the little chess set on the Millennium Falcon. This dude has a really strong history of puppetry and creature effects and stop motion. And now this movie, I think, I get the impression, I haven't read this, but I just can imagine this guy in his like studio tinkering away at this movie for decades, and now it's on Shudder. And like not just the New York Times, but like AV Club, other people have really just, I think Wired magazine, people have really latched onto this as like a magnum opus and something to really take notice of. So that's out there on Shudder now.
Yep. And I hope everybody will be happy to hear that Bruce Campbell is writing a comic book series. It's a limited series, and Sergeant Rock versus Nazi zombies. And I don't know. I just like the idea that he's out there still doing this stuff, right? I don't know. I just saw him in doing his cameo in the Doctor Strange film. So that always makes me happy. But I like that he's still out there in the world,
Absolutely. It's like some of the art does look interesting. It's him fighting Nazi zombies, like with his fists, I think. Or not Bruce Campbell, but a guy who probably could pass for Bruce Campbell, a fitter version of Bruce Campbell out there knocking zombies out.
Oh, sorry. It's Sergeant Rock versus the Army of the Dead. Yeah. But they are basically like Nazi zombies. So yeah. That's where that came from. And that's, he's been a big comic book fan for many years, a like graphic novel fan. And so I just think it's kind of fun that he's like really into that kind of classic, like horror fan stuff. So I definitely will watch this. I think it's like a six book series maybe, but it wouldn't shock me if they decide to do something else with this in addition, because it seems like a lot of fun. So anyway,
it's interesting to me that it feels like there are more actors making comic books, and I don't know if I'm imagining this, but like with Keanu Reeves making his Berserker one, that he went on to like one of the late night talk shows and talked about it. And now I've found a top 10 list of actors who make comic books, and it's some people who aren't all that surprising, honestly.
Right.
But like Kevin Smith, Patton Oswalt, though, Samuel L. Jackson did one, Nick Cage. So I don't know if it's a movement or a moment, but actors seem to be making comic books, and I think that's. I mean, they already see stories visually. What one would assume. So,
well, right, and it's not like he's drawing this; he's like partnered with an artist to do this. So that's also a key thing. You've got to have somebody who's really, really good at what they do. And Eduardo Rizzo is the one who is doing this, and he's an Eisner winning artist. So not definitely bringing in the A team for the art piece of this. So I think that this is, I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm kind of excited about it. I do think it's kind of funny that Bruce Campbell said that he wrote the comic like a Michael Bay movie. So in some sense, and he was sort of saying like if they were to actually make this a movie, it'd be really expensive, because he was like, I'm putting in as many explosions as possible, because you don't have to pay for them in the comic book, right? So it's kind of funny.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, I thought that was a pretty funny comment. But anyway,
to the main event, I think.
Yes, let's jump into it.
So we're talking today about Wyrmwood, Road of the Dead, which was consciously a melding of zombie movies and Mad Max by two sort of amateur but experienced amateur director and producer, a team of brothers who produced and directed the film, and did it on effectively a shoestring budget. I think the origin story of this movie is pretty impressive. They did one Indiegogo campaign that raised $37,000. Mm-hmm. They married that to another, I guess they did another crowdfund, maybe just in Australia, and they got some money from like the Australian, we want to help people make movies fund, and that all added up to $160,000 Australian, which is about 110 in today dollars US, but I don't know what it would have been like less, I assume, in 2014 or 2013 or whenever they were making this. The Indiegogo pitch video is really interesting to watch. When they were asking for that money, they were just like, look, we've been making movies. It was kind of like an M. Night Shyamalan. Thank you. Origin story where they've just been making movies since they were kids. And so it's just kind of like breathing to them. And they put together a team of actors and friends and made the short that they put into the Indiegogo pitch. And that's really interesting to watch too, because it's the same actors who were in the film. The bald guy with the beard who
Mm.
picks up Barry on the road. Except in this case, it's like that guy is playing the role that Benny ends up playing in the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So they did a little bit of a switcheroo.
I like
Um,
Benny a lot, so I kind of agree with that switch. I thought that actor was fantastic.
yeah, there's not a lot of dialogue in the short. So I think, yeah, Benny probably brought a lot more charisma. Not
Yeah.
that the dude, his name is Chalker, by the way, the bald guy with the beard, wasn't. Either way,
Yeah,
the
but
origin, the
Leon
origin story.
Burchill is really good as Benny.
Oh yeah, yeah, he's
I
Leon
think he was
Burchill.
one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. So
He brought a lot of comedy to
he
the.
did. He was definitely comic relief, but he had such a great delivery in general.
Yeah.
Just fantastic.
Um. So this movie is high octane, I think, is another way to characterize it. It's very like a lot of fast edits. They don't dwell on too many scenes for very long. And even though the story is told between this brother and sister, for the most part, flashing back between their two experiences, you don't really stay with either one of their stories for very long. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I do think that they do a pretty good job, more so with him than with her, at doing a little bit of character building. But he also at least has like his family to play off of and
Oof.
those relationships, and that was rough. But I think that they did a really good job at building that story for him. I would have liked to see a little bit more with her and maybe some, non-zombie interaction. We learn a lot about her, after everything like hits the fan basically, but I just think, but they do a really good job at like sort of cutting to different things and making sure that you like, I do think they do a good job at making you care about them, despite the fact that it's kind of a shallow take in general on the characters, right?
And for
We
her,
don't
she is
overall.
gagged for most of the
Yeah, yeah,
movie.
and which gotta say, I think that if my only not my only criticism, but my main criticism is that in terms of like, well, you know how I love body horror, there's a bit of that in here, and I just do not love body horror, and I just think that they could have gotten the point across on those ends of things. They didn't need to do the multiple scenes that they did with this, and there's a couple of things like that in this. I'm just like, okay, you got the point, right? Like you don't need to build it in that way. And I think it could have been edited down a bit in terms of some of those things. That's just my own personal opinion, but I just thought it didn't add to the story, the multiple lab body horror things, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, you don't need as much as they did.
Yeah, but you can't also cut a lot out of this movie because it's only an hour and 38 minutes. So I think they, given more of a budget and a little more time to fine tune their scripts, maybe they could have come up with ways to have less
Maybe,
of the
but I
torture
will
shed.
say, yeah, but I will say with this budget, it's a pretty incredible film.
The
And it's
effects
much,
alone.
yeah, the effects are incredible. Also, I will say the editing, and if you're going out there looking to do sort of like a Max sort of zombie thing, they really did it. They did it well. And so I'm not complaining about that. And believe me, my only criticism is, I mean, for other people who are into body horror, they're probably into those scenes. I just am not. So that's probably just a personal preference.
I think they put together a really good cast for this too. And we've
Oh
already
yeah,
talked about Leon Burchill, who plays Benny. But Barry, the lead male, is also very good and does do some probably pretty heavy lifting because, I mean, early on he says to Benny, I used a nail gun on my wife and daughter this morning. I'm not sure how to tell you a story about that. And then that that's coming, and then you spend another half an hour with those with the three of them. You're like, oh my god, it's coming,
yeah.
isn't it? Um,
And it's coming, and but they still do a great job. And
yeah.
again, the cast was really strong. They do this just a very tiny dinner scene with Barry and his family,
Mm-hmm.
Annie, his wife, and Megan, his daughter. And it's a small scene, but you learn so much in that one scene. And I thought that was really, in terms of writing, and just building that specific character, and honestly, just sort of building up the horror of what this guy has gone through. I thought it was just incredibly just tight, basically. And
Again,
like,
I think it comes down to the editing. Like the dialogue is
yeah,
fairly mundane.
it
It's
is,
the way
but
that they shoot each of those little scenes. The
yep,
young woman Megan or Megan Megan, I think, is
Megan.
having like an inane conversation about like who's a slut in her class or whatever. And they're it's like it's nothing you're gonna like, it's gonna change your life as far as dialogue, but the way that it's shot, and then as soon as things kind of go off, it's a lot of those fast cuts
Yeah.
to really punch up the edit. Like when they're driving away from the house after the zombie outbreak has started, they have this really effective way of showing them running over zombies, which is they show someone running up to the car, and
Yep.
then they cut back to inside the car, and they're just doing it all through Foley work and
Yep.
noises. And I thought that was actually really,
That
really
was
cool.
really great. And I mean, they spent the most time building up the things about Barry and his family. As I said, I would have liked to see a little bit more with Brooke, but also a little bit more with Benny. We have a little bit with him and his brothers. And, you do understand the horror of what he's going through, but it doesn't hit quite as hard because there's really no dialogue really between him and his brothers. So it's not like you even have that anything with them, right? So you do get the sense of the horror of it, but not quite. It doesn't hit as hard as it does with Barry,
Yeah.
and ultimately Benny doesn't even have the wherewithal to he can't take out his brother. He just can't do it. So
The way
um
he tells that story too is very his like it's in his voice in the current time talking
right.
back about like how his brothers are both dead, but he doesn't seem that upset about it. And then at the end of that story, he's like, "Yeah, what did you do this morning, or whatever? Do you have any stories, Barry?" And Barry's like, "Yeah, my wife and daughter, blah blah blah." The scene where Benny is walking in the woods with his two brothers was they were doing some crazy color stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
they were. And that felt a little less, I mean, that felt almost like dream-like, right?
and maybe
The way
that's what they
they
were
did it.
going for since he was relating the story, but
Yeah.
it was definitely like taking an approach that I don't feel like we saw much of for the rest of the movie. So that was kind of interesting. I feel like they were just being experimental for a fair amount of this.
Yeah, and I mean, but I will say, it just was sort of to me, it was a joy to watch this. I just thought it was, and they get, they get into the schlocky stuff, and it's definitely it has a specific feel to it, which is just a little like kind of like, I don't know, gonzo zombie stuff, which I think is definitely what they were going for. But it like I couldn't believe the budget when I saw it. And I feel like I remember when they were doing um, this GoFundMe or whatever it was, Kickstarter for this. But I like, I'm all for whatever they want to do, basically. Like I think it's kind of fun. And they have a bunch of other horror films, and obviously um they did the sequel to this, which is the Apocalypse thing. I haven't watched it, but it's very clear that it has a much larger budget. I don't know if that necessarily helps it. What do you think?
I mean, I'd have to see it to weigh in. Yeah, sometimes that doesn't help, but I'm going to withhold my criticism or my opinion until we see that movie.
I'd also say he's coming out. He's got another project, like a horror film that he's working on, not zombie related, but it's like an arachnophobia movie, basically called Sting. So it just feels like he's just really. I mean, he has like a niche now, or I mean, he's had a niche for a while. But I'm like definitely into this idea of doing these kinds of projects, and I don't know. I want to see the Apocalypse sort of sequel to this, and maybe we'll have to review that as well. But part of the thing about a smaller budget like this, I do think that it forces directors to take some creative, to be creative about how they're using it, and I do think that the effects for this were just incredibly good. Like
Yeah.
we've seen bigger budget films that didn't do it nearly as well.
They also experimented with some different sort of approaches to zombie stuff. Like,
Mhm.
so it's like, asteroids or whatever, meteorites turn people into zombies. and then they start breathing out this green smoke, which you see for the first half of the movie. You're like, what is going on with their mouths?
Yeah, I was like, is it just cold there? I was like trying to figure out what it was.
Are they filming this on a really cold day? That's messed up. But then it's kind of green. And then halfway through the movie, we realize that, well, gas doesn't work anymore, but blood now is flammable, and not just blood, but this like green stuff that the zombies breathe out. And then they have to fix them to a mask. And once you combine putting the zombies in a mask and the up armored Hilux that they're driving for most of the film, suddenly you are right there in Mad Max, right? Like it literally, like the most recent Mad Max with God, I can't remember the actors' names, but you know the one I'm talking about, where the people like
with Charlize Theron and
Charlize Theron, yeah, and Tom Hardy, and they're, you know, the way that they have them wearing masks and are like some people are attached to the vehicle, and you're right there, yeah, like that's what's going on. And I think that was actually kind of a genius approach to making something, taking the zombie stuff and making it a little bit different and fitting it into the theme that you were going for. So I really enjoyed that.
And I like that. And I think that I liked the idea that, so basically anybody with A negative blood wasn't turned like other people were, whatever this reaction to the meteorites were. The one thing that I don't necessarily know is how this little military outfit that they run into, and that's responsible for the majority of the body horror here, how they got up and running so quickly. Like they have vehicles that are basically fully functional in this sort of like much like higher level of science way, that are, you know, it seems like this happened pretty quickly. I just don't, that I think you have to kind of just let that go basically, but it is still, maybe they'll explain it more in the second film, but like why this group was basically able to be up and running and had figured it all out enough so that they're doing like experiments on people who are A negative. And then the other thing that was a little mysterious to me, that maybe it's, and maybe I just have to like let this go, but if people are A negative, are not susceptible to the meteor thing, why would they even be susceptible to the zombie bites? But I guess that's a different transmission maybe. So that was, you know, that was just my thought. And I just don't fully understand what had happened to the sister, but these are, you know, these are the things of horror films. So you just kind of have to like let it go and sort of suspension of disbelief.
I see these also as like potential story hooks for the next, right, you know, chunk of the story. They did a good job of like, letting you know that there were more of those soldiers out there, by like a couple of lines of dialogue, and then they actually have an interaction with more of them at the very end of the movie. I thought that was a good way to show that this is like an organization that they're like up against. A bigger outfit. I thought that was pretty cool.
I also want to say that the stunts and things like that were also pretty impressive for this budget. Like, and they did a really good job. Like, honestly, they could have filmed all the stuff outside on like just a couple of roads in the woods, right? Like there's just probably a limited set, but they did a really good job with what they had. And, you know, some of it's that they're out in the middle of nowhere. So everything, you know, you could kind of just dress things up and things are you make them look a little bit different from each scene, differently from each scene. But I just thought that the editing was really very incredibly high level. So I just enjoyed that. And I actually was like rewatching a couple of things because I was just like, wow, like that was a really smart piece of editing. And I thought, you know, overall, this was just an enjoyable film to watch. Look, I'll talk about the body horror part, but like anything that involves any kind of like lab or people chained up and having like scientific experiments done to them, I'm just not on board. It's like a thing that just it gives me the willies. I can't enjoy that. And they had the sort of like prerequisite kind of crazy, weird, sciencey dude that like takes joy in that pain that he's sort of like, you know, dancing around and playing weird music. And it's not my thing. Is it your thing? I don't think you're into body horror, really.
No, it wasn't clear what he was going for, but that was fine to me. Maybe we went back there one or two times too many, but like they didn't make you wait too long for Brooke to start manifesting her powers and to have a real clear sense of what was happening. And you had to kind of understand why she was manifesting that. So you needed one or two of those scenes with the Mad Doctor
Yeah.
So kind of like, I don't know that they could have done it much more efficiently, but yeah, was it my favorite part of the movie? No. My favorite part of the movie was probably when Benny and Barry run up to the red shack that you see in the
Yeah, that
opening
was one of
scene.
the best things ever. That was
Benny
great.
just yells out at this other dude, his name's Kel, I think, is like, "Hey, can we come in there?" And Kel's like,
Okay.
"Yeah, okay, sure."
There is, I will say, there is a very Australian humor
Oh
piece
yeah,
to this, just in the pacing and how it's hitting, like just a very dry, kind of nonchalant sense of humor, which I really loved. I'd also say that the tone has like that dark humor um, throughout it. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but for the most part, it does. And it basically is a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, even in the face of absolute horror. And the best example of this is the scene with, I guess the guy's name is Chalker and Benny and
oh god,
Barry. And like Benny takes out Chalker, like just shoots his head off. And he's like, is he okay? And like, he's not clearly. And they just kind of like move on from there. And
yeah, like within seconds,
it's like no big deal. Just shrug your shoulders and move along. And I was like, whoa, okay, so that's this kind of film,
and
right?
Barry's
And,
just
and
like,
keep
"Hey, you coming?"
and keep in mind, this is after some pretty fraught scenes where Barry has basically had to, not basically, he
Yeah,
did. He had to kill his wife, his daughter.
he was suicidal.
He was suicidal, and Chalker basically was, you know, in a pretty rough situation and just continues to kind of support Barry and then just gets taken out for his trouble, not by Barry, obviously, but accidentally by Benny. So it was like that was like, whoa, okay. And when that happened, I was like, oh, this is like a very different type of film than I thought it was initially. Um, so anyway, that was kind of interesting, just those choices. But I do think that with the humor and the way that they used it spliced in, it's it's just like a more enjoyable watch, I guess, than if it was just that straight, zombocalypse thing happening.
Yeah, they also had a quick shout out to Ned Kelly, famous Australian outlaw, who was, I think, most famous for wearing like a massive suit of armor and a big shootout with the police I think in the 19th century. Um, when Frank comes out of the red shed wearing that getup, well, he doesn't wear it again after that scene, but
No?
he wears other armor, and they even call him Ned right after they get inside, which I thought was a cool little shout out to Australian folk lore, I guess, history. And Frank was another like interesting character. Like you said, like Barry doesn't really get to. He's a foil or whatever, right? He's the straight man. He doesn't get to be comedic, but almost everybody else in his little team does, and so that kind of helps give you the levity. Because otherwise, just Barry by himself would be kind of a big downer because of what he's been through. Benny, meanwhile, doesn't care about
Nope.
anything. And Frank, it introduces humor. Like when he actually gets bitten, he's like, "Get me the medical box."
Oh, I know. It was such a like, and it's like beers in there. And then Betty's like, do you mind if I finish this beer
Yeah.
again? After something horrific has happened. So, but I did think it was just, there was a lot of fun things. I actually didn't clock the whole Ned Kelly thing. I thought that and a lot of their suits of armor, I thought it was very Monty Python actually.
Mm.
But that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I would say like even in the third act, it doesn't like lose any steam
No, it keeps
because
going. It gains energy, actually, I think.
yeah, because then you get into this like confrontation with the soldiers, and Barry and Brooke are reunited, and you're all excited because Brooke is like testing out her new powers,
Mhm.
and I think yeah, it's like it's still pretty exciting all the way to the final credits. In fact, when the final like this, they're playing heavy metal like after the last shot, and then like bam, you see the big ending title
Yeah, it looks
credit.
great.
It looks so good. Yeah, this movie was a lot of fun.
And it was satisfying too, because you see Brooke looking all like badass
Yeah,
and bringing in the troops, basically her zombie troops. So I really enjoyed that part of it, and I mean, definitely set up for a sequel, but it could have just stood on its own if they didn't want to do that. So it was definitely a lot of fun. It was a fun ride.
Yeah,
What did you
absolutely.
think of the vehicles that used? I really did like their little tricked out truck that they used.
Yeah, the Hilux, that was really cool. I think they must have put a lot of effort into just like props for that. They have like a cage in the back. They've got tubes and hoses everywhere. They even
Yep.
have a really high speed tracking shot of how their zombie ignition system works, right? Like they take the camera, they fast forward it, I think, but they take the camera from like a zombie breathing gas into the thing, goes into the generator, up through some hoses into another like thing, carburetor type thing or whatever in the hood of the truck. They took care on the detail, like not only in the stuff that was going to be in the background and would be cool, but then they also had like that little harpoon. I think they really just wanted to have a harpoon on top of that truck. They didn't really use it that much.
Oh, they didn't. I would also say that I think part of why this was so successful is that they use a lot of practical effects and props and things like that. There's definitely some quick editing and things. Obviously, you're like shooting off a harpoon, but they didn't. There was just a lot of practical effects and really good editing. Certainly, there were some things added in, like the zombie fog, obviously,
Yeah.
but just in terms of like the makeup and things like that, they a little went a long way in terms of what they did. And they used for the zombies the sort of like the like what are those blue white contacts or whatever they are to sort of like indicate the change. But I thought that was pretty successful in how they used it related to the other makeup. And I didn't see, like, even with the crowd of zombies, I didn't see a lot of laziness. Like everybody looked pretty good
Mm-hmm.
overall. But they also, because it was so quick moving and quick edits, you didn't have a lot of time to linger.
Yeah.
I think where they used the most sort of makeup effects was in the little laboratory thing. And that's mainly on the zombie on the table. Everybody else, they did some really, I don't want to call them sneaky. I think they're smart tricks where they're like kind of their faces are covered up and things like that. So you didn't have to like go all out with the zombie makeup. But the guy on the slab, basically on the gurney, that guy, they did a lot with like the shadowing and all that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so anyway, I thought that they did fantastic job on all of those effects, and it was just really like, again, I could not believe that they did it with that budget.
And shout out to Brooks Boob Sweat. Honestly,
Oh
that
my
that
gosh, that was like, come on.
that boob
They
sweat
kept
did a
dousing
lot of work.
that actor must have just been doused in that, like they must have been spraying her down. There's like so many shots. She must have been so tired, like sitting in that lab. She probably thought the lab scenes went on way too long. That was like rough. That seemed like a really rough shoot.
Yeah.
Because like her arms really are held above her for all that time. Like that's not fun. That's not a fun shoot.
That's the most of the movie. We haven't painstakingly gone through the plot. So if you hadn't seen it and like the way it sounds, definitely go see it. Get in a car and drive to Bulla Bulla as fast as you can.
Yes, I agree.
Sorry,
I didn't
did I
even
say
know
the
it
words
played,
boob sweat too many times for you, HA? Have you shut
uh,
down?
I shut down a little bit, but I was actually just thinking I didn't even know that there was a place called Bulla Bulla.
I don't think there is. I've been looking it up on Google Maps, and I got the impression this was Western Australia, was where they were setting the film, but there is a Mount Bulla Bulla in New South Wales.
Hmm. Or maybe they were just teasing us to
Yeah,
just making up a name.
like it sounds vaguely Australian. So then there's a place
Honestly, it
called
wouldn't it wouldn't
Bulla.
it wouldn't shock me because you know, it's there's definitely a very good sense of humor about the whole thing. So
Yeah.
anyway, and one of the things, just to sort of heading back to the practical effects piece of this, I mean, if you've seen any interviews with Kia Roche Turner, he really is all about the practical effects, and you can see that in his other projects and things like that. And he's like, I didn't really get into movie making to sort of be doing things on a green screen. And you know what? As a horror film fan, I really appreciate that. And I think I don't mind some CGI, I don't mind some effects to sort of like highlight certain things,
Hmm.
but I feel like the films that you and I really like tend to have more of the practical effects overall for the most part.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's yeah, they're not phoning it in. Like they have to really work at it to give you the
And I
good
mean, look, it's
effects.
more time consuming, and quite frankly, you have to really like map that stuff out because it's more expensive, and in the aggregate it is anyway. But I just think that it comes across in just such a better way. So anyway,
Oh, can we also, while we're talking about effects, can we just talk really fast just to be blown away by lighting the captain's face on fire?
Oh, yeah.
On $160,000.
Yeah.
After all the effects you've done, that's one of the big effects at the end of the film is they light a dude's face on fire. And like I think they have a high-speed camera and they throw some matches at this guy's face. You watch his like skin bounce. Maybe that's effect, or maybe that's CGI. I don't know. But like they bounce off his skin and then they explode into flame. And oh my gosh, that was by itself like an amazing effect right there. I wonder how much of that was practical.
I was almost watching that effect. I was like, did they I feel like they must have known they wanted to do that. And they're like, we're going to spend this amount, or they had money left over in their budget. And they're like, we'll have to do this. Right. But I feel like they plotted this one out. It seemed very deliberate. Right. And they also like the one thing I thought was I just thought it was interesting is like the characters that like, and I do think that was part of the reason for going back to the lab so much is that you definitely want that doctor dude to die. And in this case, you want this military dude to die. They're both total jerks and they have to build up that scene and they make them both die in horrific ways. So, I think that is somewhat satisfying.
Yeah, very satisfying. Definitely. I mean, a lot of good guys fall along the way, right? But they also make the bad guys pay.
Correct. All right. That is all I
think that's all we've got. Let us know what you think about Wyrmwood. Were you one of its backers on Indiegogo back in 20 whatever? Let us know if you've seen the movie, if you liked it, whatever. We are going to have all the news we talked about in our show notes. That'll be up on Reanimated Podcast at reanimatedpodcast.com. And you can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. And we are on Twitter at reanimatedpcast. I don't know what we're going to talk about next time, but when we come back, you can betcha it'll be about zombies or vampires.
Absolutely. Until next time. Ciao.
Bye for now.